At this point in time, I want to discuss the confrontational episodes theory, or the social confrontation theory, or the confrontation episodes theory, which sits within the interactional perspective of conflict. So there's we'll skip the identity of a conflict, or identifying a conflict, that activity, and we'll look at some of the key points in this particular theory. It looks at how conflict actually unfolds, or the process that we see that a confrontation in a conflict goes through before a conflict can be addressed or resolved. It really looks at the sequence of a conflict and how it actually unfolds between the parties involved in that conflict interaction. We want to define what a confrontation is, and this is important to understanding what the theory is all about. It really happens when one person says that the other person's behavior is questionable, or it violates an expectation. So there's a clear accusation from one party that the other party or parties in the conflict or in the interaction has violated something. And when that happens, we consider that to be a confrontation. So things that we want to keep in mind is that certain episodes in a conflict, they actually involve a confrontation, but not all conflicts involve confrontations, because all conflicts may not involve an accusation of a violation of a rule or anything like that. When we speak about confrontation, to go through the entire process, it involves actually working through the behaviors, and in a couple minutes, we'll actually see what these steps are, in terms of accepting the legitimacy of the violation, or rejecting it, or denying it. So it involves working through these behaviors to get to a point where we can then negotiate what future behavior needs to look like for us to avoid or manage our interaction in a more productive way. So I mentioned this earlier, it's also known as the social confrontation theory. One of the things that we must keep in mind is that it's referred to as an issue-driven type of conflict, meaning that it centers on the violation that has occurred. And this goes back to the next 2 points, go back to something that we said in the previous video when we looked at the core underpinnings, or the core assumptions of the interactional perspective, that in this, the conflict is co-created, and the conflict is very purposeful or intentional. Like we are looking at what are some of the choices and the intention behind the choices made inside of the conflict. So this is a very simple overview of what this process looks like, and I'll try to break it down as best as I can. But if we saw this in a diagrammatic representation, it would look somewhat different, right? So I'll try to go through it as best as I can. In the initiation phase, which is the first phase of it, there is this accusation that is leveled, right? One party says that the other party has violated an expectation of behavior. That, you know what, you just I held the door for you and you did not say thank you, because the expectation is that you say thank you. Or we could even look at it in a more simplistic way, right? I was going through the door, someone was right behind me, and I didn't hold the door for them. So that person can then say, hey, what's going on there? You didn't hold the door for me, because they're interpreting that as a violation of an expectation. Or I'm driving and I am coming to a stop sign, or I'm coming to a stoplight, and somebody cuts across and comes in front of me. What I may do is then I may stick my head out of the window, and let's just say we're doing the more normative things here, or the more acceptable things here, going back to the previous theory. I stick my head out of the window and I said, hey, what's going on? Why did you do that? Right? I'm confronting them and accusing them of violating a rule which suggests that you shouldn't cut people off in traffic. What needs to happen then is for us to work through this. If we are working through this, once I make that accusation, the person who is confronted, or the person who is accused, the accused then needs to say, yeah, I see that as legitimate, or no, that is actually not a legitimate thing, right? So let's go with the easier one first. If they see that as not legitimate, then I may have to invoke a rule, or we may have to invoke a rule like, no, the code says, or the driving book says X, Y, and Z, right? Or we may have to come up with some other remedy for this. Because you cut me off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to report you to the authorities or something like that. May not necessarily correct the behavior, but that might be the only remedy that I have. Or it may just be that the person says, that is not even legitimate. I don't care about what you say. That is what I did there was not was that wasn't a cut off at all. That was just me merging into the lane. So that wasn't a cut off. So I'm rejecting that completely, and there's no resolution, and they just drive off, right? So that's if they see it as non-legitimate. Now, if they see this, sorry, if they see this as legitimate, what then happens is that there are a couple of things that can happen. I'll go to one part first and then come to the other part. If they see my accusation of them cutting me off as legitimate, what they may say is, you know what, I really did that behavior. I really did that. That was something that I did. So they may accept the behavior, or they may say, no, it's legitimate to accuse me of that, but I didn't really cut you off. I was merging and you came up fast, so that really wasn't a cut off. That is just a different interpretation of what happened, right? So they may admit the behavior, or they may deny the behavior completely. They may say that, no, I did not actually do that, or you know what, no, I actually did do that. If they deny the behavior, then there may have to be a reaffirmation of what the rule is. They may say, you know what, if I really did that, then yes, that would be a violation, but I didn't do that, so there's no violation. Or maybe there just is no resolution, right? And they're just like, no, that I didn't do that behavior, and they just leave without any resolution. Or they may say, I didn't do that behavior, but if I did that, that would be a problem, so I do apologize, or something like that, right? But they reaffirm that cutting somebody off is a violation. They're reaffirming the behavior, or they say, no, that didn't happen, and they just ignore it and leave. If they admit the behavior, what then happens is that they can then say, yes, I broke a rule, right? So the rule that I broke was that I cut you off when you were clearly moving straight ahead. And that is a problem. So if they admit the behavior and they admit that they broke a rule, then they can accept responsibility for it. So what they may say is, hey, you know what? I broke the rule. I did that. I cut in front of you. I actually broke a rule which says that we shouldn't cut each other off, and I am sorry for that. That was wrong of me. I accept responsibility for it. And if I accept responsibility for it, then there are two things I can do, right? I can remedy it and say, you know, I'm sorry, just go ahead. You can go ahead in front of me. Or I can say, that is a rule that I should not have done. I am sorry. And that is me reaffirming this rule of not cutting each other off. However, it could be that I admit that I broke a rule, right? Meaning that I cut you off. So I admit that I cut you off. I admit that I broke a rule which involves cutting you off. But then I can say, no, that I'm not responsible for that. The reason why I had to do that is because there was another car coming towards me. So I had to swerve this way. So I didn't really cut you off, but I had to actually do that. So I'm not responsible for cutting you off, or for what you're saying that I did. So in that case, if I deny responsibility, then we have a series of things we can go through, right? We can pull up law that says, no, this is what cutting off looks like. We can figure out how we want to remedy the situation, or you know what, fine, go ahead, remediation, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't think I did anything to you, but it seems like you're very passionate about this, so I'll let you move ahead. Reaffirmation, there is a rule, right? There is a rule, but that is not what happened in this case. I actually had to do that because of what was going on with this other vehicle that was coming towards me. Now remember, all of this is if I saw the rule as legitimate, right? If I'm accepting the behavior. There's another level to this in terms of, it may be that I am seeing the behavior, but I may say, you know what, no, there's something superseding that. And this can look very much like the denying responsibility piece after I've admitted that a rule is broken, right? So there could be a superseding rule. So for example, using this same vehicle driving and cutting off scenario. Let's say I'm driving and the person cuts me off, and I cut some, let's say you're driving and I cut you off, and then you accuse me of cutting you off. I may say, yes, it's legitimate, but there was a more pressing need for me to cut you off. What was the more pressing need? I have a passenger with me. That passenger is sick, and that passenger is about to throw up. And I needed to get to the shoulder. I needed to get to the side, to the shoulder quickly in order for them to feel safe and to feel secure. So passenger safety or driver safety or whatever safety is more important than the rule that says I cannot cut you off. So there's a superseding rule. So I see the rule that you have there of people shouldn't be cutting you off as legitimate, but there's a superseding rule that says that if there's danger on the road, then what do I need to do? I need to act really quickly. So if I invoke a superseding rule, then you have to see that rule as, then you can see that rule as legitimate or non-legitimate. And then depending on where you go from there, then we come to the resolution as to what happens, right? So or each time I mention something like legislation, remedy, reaffirmation, that is a resolution phase of it, where we say, hey, you know what? No, there's a new rule that needs to come up that when something like this happens, this is what we need to do. We need to figure out how to, you know what? Okay, I'll stop and I'll let you go forward, or we'll continue driving, but I'll slow down and I'll let you go this way, or I'll pay you something for the violation that I committed, or maybe there's no resolution to it. So in summary, the confrontation episode has three real broad aspects of it, right? This initiation where there's this accusation, this legitimacy that goes through a number of different stages as to whether or not there's a superseding rule, whether the person admits the behavior, whether they admit that a rule has been violated, whether they accept responsibility, and the legitimacy or illegitimacy or non-legitimacy of all of those claims within that. And then once we've gone through that middle part there, then what comes out at the end is a resolution, which could be a whole new rule being formed. No resolution could be a part of it. That we just have to agree to disagree, that there's nothing that we can really do to fix this. Or it may be that there's reaffirmation of the existing rule. Like, you know, no, that really is a rule. I really did violate that. And that rule is important. And that can happen whether we see it as superseding or not. Remediation or even a remedy to fix that problem that actually happened. So this is essentially what the confrontation episode theory is centered on. Some things that we want to keep in mind: the first rule must be resolved. So that first violation must be addressed. That first violation must be addressed before any other violations can be addressed. And the person confronted at any point in time can accept, reject, or amend at any point. And this goes both ways, right? So if I have accepted, rejected, if you accuse me of something, I can accept, reject, or amend. And then if I propose a superseding rule, then you may accept the legitimacy of that, or reject it, or amend it, or whatever have you, right? So there's a series of things that may need to happen in this conflict episodes theory. When we're looking at this in terms of how we manage conflict, the person being accused, the receiver, should not immediately deny, right? When they are confronted, right? And I know I didn't do that, you know. Don't immediately deny, or avoid immediate denial, and actively listen to see, did I really violate a rule? The person confronting needs to do a couple of things, right? When you're confronting, you need to suspend judgment and name the violation very specifically. You did this, right? This is what happened. You need to listen for an agreement. So is the person agreeing or demonstrating consensus with the rule that you said has been violated? And you also need to be very explicit about the rule. Failure to do any of these three things can cause the conflict to de-escalate, to escalate in a very destructive and counterproductive way. And but in holding these things to the fore, that could help to provide for a very productive resolution to the conflict. I hope this addresses some of the concerns. In the next video, we'll discuss game theory. Thank you.